Alright guys, so we're going to use this as our introduction to nutrition, really just using this to cover the basic vocab, not a whole lot more than that going into this little chunk here, so we'll get into all the details in class. But so just some vocab off the bat. So first part, macronutrients. Macro obviously means big, right? Macro is big, so we need these in relatively large amounts, so things like carbs, lipids, proteins. Usually I get the question where somebody says, but lipids, we're not supposed to have a lot of lipids. Well, the amount we're still talking about, we're still talking in terms of grams. So it's still pretty good chunks, okay? And then the micronutrients are things that we need very small amounts of. So our vitamins and minerals, and we're usually talking about those in like milligrams or micrograms. So they're really, really small chunks. But those are going to be your micronutrients, all right? Next piece on here, you have organic versus inorganic. This is old vocab for us. So organic means it's carbon-based. It's comes from living things, right? And that's going to be your carbs, proteins, lipids, and vitamins. Okay, they're all carbon-based. And then the inorganic, they're not carbon-based, and that's going to be your water and minerals. All right. Two more vocab words here for us. We got essential. Okay, essential is stuff that we need to get in our diet because we can't make it. So if we can't make it, we have to be able to get it in our diet. We have to eat it, okay? So whenever you see that word, you'll see it on packages all the time. It'll say 9 essential vitamins and minerals. That's what they're trying to talk about there, is things that your body can't make, so you have to get them from your food. Versus non-essential and non-essential, if you don't eat it, we can still make it or synthesize. So that word synthesize means to make. So we can actually make it. So for instance, there's some amino acids that we can't make, and they are essential. Okay, but there are a couple others that we can take some amino acids and convert them. So even if you don't eat them, we can actually make them from other amino acids. We can kind of convert them around and move them around. So that's called non-essential. Cool? All right. The next term up here, and I think I've got a big formatting issue. I'm missing something on here, but the next big term on here is enriched. So when we talk enriched, we're adding back, so I would underline that, guys, some nutrients that have been lost during the processing, okay? So for instance, when you make bread, you tend to lose a whole lot of processing. So when you crush wheat, the very outside of wheat has lots and lots of nutrition, but when you make flour out of it, you lose almost all of that. You lose almost all the B vitamins. You lose almost all the good stuff, okay? So your typical white flour has nothing but calories in it, all right? Versus if you have whole grain stuff, that means it wasn't crushed and you didn't lose the nutrients. So that's what they're looking at. So when you process something and you lose nutrients, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll enrich it, and they'll say, all right, well, this grain was supposed to have some B vitamins in it, so let's add some B vitamins back in. It's almost like they take a multivitamin and just kind of crush it up and add it in there. All right, and that's the whole idea with like the whole grains. So whole grains are much, much better for you because you get the outer part of the seed, and that actually provides you with the important stuff. Okay, so they don't have to be enriched. Versus like your typical like white bread is nutritiously just calories unless they enrich it, unless they add things in. Okay, and a similar idea is fortified down here. So fortified is the same idea, adding something in, but it's not normally found there. Okay, so not normally found there. So for instance, there's not normally any vitamin D in milk, but vitamin D helps us absorb calcium, and people are drinking, well, one of the reasons people drink milk is for the good calcium levels. So if you fortify it, if you add vitamin D in, it makes it more nutritious. It'll actually get more calcium out of the milk. Easy enough? All right, so the next chunk that you guys have on your little packet there is titled energy-yielding nutrients. So we get these energy-yielding nutrients here. And generally we get calories, or we get energy from 3 big categories. We've got our carbohydrates, carbs, and they give us 4 calories per gram. Then you got your protein, which gives us 4, and lipids, which give us 9. So a lot of people are surprised. Most people know carbs, and most people know lipids. A lot of people are surprised by this, but protein has calories. Okay, so All of these are important. They all factor into your total energy intake, your total calorie intake, and they're all going to be important in our analysis in a little bit. Okay. Obviously, lipids. The reason we convert extra calories into fat is this is much more dense. So for the same gram, the same weight we're walking around with, you can store more than double the calories in there. So it's efficient for us if we're going to save calories for when the winter is going to come and there's not much food around. We want to convert all the extra calorie into lipid, and that allows us to store it and still be able to move. It would weigh twice as much if we kept it as carbs or kept it as proteins. All right. So down here we have what's called the dietary reference intake. So they're called the DRIs. Okay, so those DRIs, and there's a couple different abbreviations you should be familiar with. So the first one's the RDA. Okay, and the RDA stands for Recommended Dietary Allowances. You can read, and this is the amount needed to prevent deficiencies in 97% of the population. It doesn't fit everybody because there's people that have like trouble absorbing certain things or might need more for certain activities. But the general rule of thumb is you want to try and get around this RDA. How much you need, okay? And usually there's lots of research behind those numbers. So there's typically lots and lots of research. So if you see something that has an RDA, you should feel pretty confident with that recommendation. You should try and get in your diet, you should get pretty close to that recommendation and feel confident that that's good, okay? When they're not quite so sure, when there's not really good scientific data, what they do is they call it adequate intake, and it's a little bit more conservative number. They're afraid of having too much and overloading on certain things, so it's more of a guesstimate, and they're just saying, hey, why don't you aim for this ballpark, but it's not really, it doesn't have as much hard science behind it as the RDA one. Okay, so AI, same idea, just not as well backed up scientifically. All right, and the last one is upper limit, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's the maximum dosage you want to take. Beyond that, you can start having negative side effects. So iron's good for you, but too much iron can actually be fatal. It's actually one of the biggest overdoses in children. Same thing with calcium. Too much calcium or vitamin C. Those types of things can cause digestive discomfort, cause all sorts of problems. All right, so an area that I really want to stress here with you guys is this here. So diet and health, okay? So diet is a risk factor, not the only determining factor for many diseases, including these down here, okay? So having a poor diet, if you don't have a healthy diet, you are much more at risk for heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes. And obviously those are catastrophic, but let's look at them a little bit more, okay? So these first three, when you look at these first three, they're the number 1, 2, and 3 causes of death. In the U.S., okay? So just about 50% of the U.S. population is going to die of one of those three things, okay? So if you'd like to live longer than the person sitting next to you, one of the biggest things you can do is eat better and help you avoid heart disease, cancer, and stroke. The link between them, is varying. For heart disease and stroke, there's like no doubt. I mean, it might be the single biggest factor. Cancer, the big examples, like if you're overweight, you're typically more prone for cancer, particularly breast cancer. You're much more prone for breast cancer. Colon cancer, right? So that all this food in the digestive tract passes through the colon, your large intestine. So that's a risk factor there, and any chemicals or anything that's in there is a risk factor. So the more red meat you eat is a big risk factor for that. But that's a big portion. Okay. The other reason we should care about this for everyone, that if you put these together, just those four things together, that's about 70 to 75% of the U.S. healthcare cost. Okay, so we spend, and it comes out to around $85 billion per year treating those four things. And again, they're linked to diet. Okay, so if we can, as a nation, eat better, we will save so much money. We will live longer, healthy, happier lives. But it's also financially, it's tough because remember we kind of pay for each other. When I have insurance, I'm paying for people that don't necessarily have insurance. So this diet stuff is really important across the board. All right. So before we move on to anything else, just to reiterate this one more time. I like to fancy that in this class you guys will get lots of things that will help you live better, healthier lives. Nutrition, got to be at the top of the list. If you took nothing else away from this course, but you became more healthy with your diet, and I think I would be more than satisfied with that, because that is what will translate, hopefully, into better health for you over the course of your life. All right, so how do we plan a healthy diet? Well, there's lots of different things, guys. This is called the ABC of planning a healthy diet. So the A, the B, the C, right on down. Okay. So adequacy is just making sure you get enough energy and nutrients for maintaining your health. Okay. Balance is that idea of like a food pyramid. So you want to have a little bit of everything in there, guys, right? So you want to make sure you're getting some carbs, you want to make sure you're getting some fat, you want to make sure you're getting some protein, your dairy, your meats, all those types of things. That's what you're looking for. You don't want to be all carbs or all protein or all anything. That's actually very bad for your diet, okay? Calories, huge, right? Because if you overeat, then you're more at risk for, you're going to put on body weight, you're going to be more at risk for heart disease and stroke and diabetes and all those things that we're going to focus on, okay? Be aware of the density of nutrients. So if you, like a potato has useful stuff in there, guys, right? The potato has some good nutrition in there. But the nutrients per calorie change a lot. So a baked potato versus French fries, there's some nutritious stuff in the French fries, but you're also throwing in all that fat. So for the amount of calories, you're getting less. All right. So the density of the nutrients changes. Okay. Everything in moderation. Stay away from the upper limits. You're not overloading on any one area. And variety. I didn't have enough. So variety. And this tries to stress the idea that even within a food group, you want some of everything. So let's start with just general variety. So on your plate, if you're having a healthy meal, you should have some fruit, veggie, some dairy, some meat, some grain on every single meal. Okay, that would be ideal. Okay, but the other part is if you can alternate what those fruits and veggies and meats are. That helps you, because an apple and a banana don't have the same thing. So if you can alternate, one day you can have an apple, and then the next day you have an orange, and the next day you have a banana, you're going to get a better coverage of your vitamins and minerals, and you're going to be healthy, okay, healthier because of that. So if you can alternate maybe you love broccoli, but broccoli, having broccoli every single day is good, but it's not great. If you get a broccoli one day and then carrots the next day and then Brussels sprouts the day after that, they each have slightly different things, and that works better for you in covering your stuff. Okay, so this is another way of breaking it down. You want to emphasize, get lots of your fruits and veggies and whole grains, which we're going to talk more about, and low-fat dairy, trying to stay away from the fat, but dairy is important for you. Include your lean meats, okay, so particularly fish and eggs and things like that are a little bit better. And unsaturated fats are actually good for us, guys. There's lots of fats that are actually good for us, and we're going to talk about those. And then you want to try and avoid these things. Try to avoid your saturated and your trans fats. Those are really bad. Your cholesterol and your sodium and your sugar. Those are the big areas, okay? Another way of looking at it, if you just did this, a lot of people like to think of a plate. Okay, so this is like your plate, okay, however much you're eating, okay, that's going to vary a lot from person to person, okay. You should have some fruit, probably cover that much of your plate. The veggies should really cover about that much of your plate. Let's go here. Your grains, okay, so your rice or your pasta or whatever it is, and then your meat. Okay, or your protein base for those of you that are vegetarians. So that's kind of what you want. It's not quite quarters, because you definitely want more veggies than fruit. Veggies are better for you, has less of the sugar in there and so forth. But that's a nice, simple way of doing it. If your plate kind of looks like that, probably doing a pretty darn good job. For those of you guys that like the numbers, you can look at it this way. So your bread, cereal, pasta, rice, you want about 6 to 11 servings. That's a huge range, because exercise, things like that. So how many carbs you actually need, that's really what this is kind of the carb section. And for a serving, we're talking about like one slice of bread or half a cup of oatmeal or rice or pasta or bagel, or a bagel the size of a yo-yo is a whole serving. So a regular bagel, like if you ate a whole bagel, that's pretty close to some people's entire servings of bread and so forth on the course of the day. All right, so bagels are really dense in terms of your carbs. Okay, some of us go overboard in this category. Most of us are under in these categories, here and here. Okay, so 3 to 5 servings of veggies a day. I don't get anywhere close to that. If I'm lucky if I get to 2. But a half a cup of raw, or a cup of cooked, or 3/4 of a cup of juice. And the difference here, guys, when you cook something, you tend to lose some of the nutrients. So if you want enough, you've got to double how much it is. So for instance, carrots, raw carrots, half a cup of raw carrots has about the same amount of nutrients for you and vitamins and minerals as a cup cooked. You lose about half of it when you cook it. So it depends on how you cook it, but that's one way. Okay. Most of us don't get enough in our fruits. Most of us, if you're lucky, we get in this kind of 2 category, like a banana, half a cup of fruit, things like that. But these are the 2 areas that my diet is definitely lacking. Okay, milk, yogurt, cheese, 2 to 3 servings a day. This is where I probably go over. I love my milk, so I probably go overboard on that. But that is really important for you guys. It's got some important stuff in there. And then I definitely go over on this one. Okay, so 2 to 3 servings a day of meat, poultry, fish, nuts, eggs, things like that. And a serving is about the size of a deck of cards. So if I had like one normal, like, I don't know, you eat like a chicken breast, okay, that would be like your meat for the entire day. A full chicken breast is going to be probably over this 3 servings right there, okay, so most of us kind of go overboard on that. That's the American diet. We're wealthy, so we spend a lot of money on meat, all right? And again, these ranges depend a lot, guys. So these ranges depend a lot on your activity, your age, your gender, all sorts of stuff, and we'll kind of touch more upon that in class. So that's kind of what I want to try and get through, guys. I really wanted to stress, get through some of this really basic vocab, so you won't have to sit in class and listen to it. But I really can't stress this enough, guys. The whole idea, when we start talking about diet and risk for health and so forth, it's obviously not smoking cigarettes, exercising. It's a no-brainer, guys. You got to be aware of what you're eating and do a good job with it, because I certainly don't want to be in this category. I don't want to be in that category, because those are premature deaths. Those are deaths where people are having heart attacks in their 50s and 60s, or people when they're having their strokes in their at a young age, guys. So you don't want to be in that category, and you want to really be working on it. All right, I'll see you in class.